Landry Jones is looking to do the improbable. A couple of fantasy starters are out for the Thursday night game, and we get you caught up on all the latest injury notes and news around the league. All this and more coming up on the Fantasy Dopes podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Dopes podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Parker. Before we get to the news and our latest Fringe rankings, let's bring in our own gurus of the show. The father figure, Mr. Michael Warren Herbert, and the house guru himself, Mr. John Fazio. What's up, guys?
Well, it's great to be back. Very excited about Week 7. We got a lot of options, a lot of things to talk about. We're going to get pretty in-depth here today, and I'm excited. Johnny?
Well, it's finally great to have both of you now on the podcast, so I have to ask, what's going on with these trips here? I want to hear about this.
Michael?
Jillian? What do you have to say, Jillian? Where have you been?
I've been, working some late nights.
Sounds suspicious to me, but okay, we'll let that slide for now.
I'm not going to places like Chicago for 2 days.
Okay. I got my eye on you. I'm doing the Larry David stare right now.
Hey, Michael wasn't here on Monday and nobody's questioning him.
I was in Miami, folks. I went down to Miami and I got some intel. We'll get into it.
Trying to show me up, are we? All right. Before we lose everybody listening to this podcast, let's get up to speed with all the latest news and injury reports from the week. Is it time to panic yet in the Steel City? A lot has changed since Monday's podcast. If you've been following our Twitter at all, the latest on Ben Roethlisberger pegs him to be sidelined for at least a month. According to ESPN's Chris Mortensen, his knee surgery will require him to miss at least 4 to 6 weeks. Originally, they were telling us he was going to sit a week and then have his bye week and come back, but that didn't really seem to make much sense to us. We weren't buying it, so this wasn't a huge surprise. And now that Landry Jones has taken over that role, how is this going to affect Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell?
I'm going to say, I'm going to go counterculture. I'm going to say it's a good thing. It's a good thing for Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. Why? He's a second-string quarterback. You've got two of the best guys at their positions in the whole league. His job, get the ball to them. They're going to hand the ball off a shitload to Le'Veon Bell. They're going to throw to Antonio Brown. I think it's great for them and for the other three guys that Ben made relevant, Jesse James, Eli Rogers, Sammy Coates. I don't think it's as good for them. Maybe he has a bit of a connection with one of these guys. We'll see, but good for Antonio and Le'Veon, bad for the other three.
I'm actually surprised that you think it's going to be better for Brown and Bell. I mean, wouldn't you want their top quarterback to be out in the field rather than their second stringer?
Well, yes, in theory, yes, you'd rather have Ben Roethlisberger out there, but I'm saying it's better for Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell than it is for the other three. Like it's not better than having Roethlisberger out there, but it's better for them than it is for the other three in this situation.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. However, I still think that their values get dinged just a bit. I mean, there's still must-starts in fantasy. It's kind of impossible to bench both of those guys. However, it's still kind of suspicious that these guys are going to put up the same numbers like they were in the past week. So,
I guess Le'Veon, you give him the ball and you let Le'Veon do his thing.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, he's a running back. They're going to give him the rock and say, go win the game, boy.
Correct, but he's also very involved with their passing game, and that actually might take a bit of a hit. I don't know if they're going to be relying on him to catch as many balls as if Ben Roethlisberger was in the game. But we'll see. Jones has been starting for them last year when Roethlisberger was out. Hopefully he builds up more trust with the other guys and you can get like a late touchdown and like garbage time or something like that. But it's a little unknown right now. So honestly, at the end of the day, we'll just have to see how he does, and has a tough test coming up this weekend against the Pats. So at least he's home. That's about all I could say.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit frustrating for Steelers fans and for owners who have Big Ben, who have Antonio. And next up, we had a trade go down at the beginning of the week. The Packers traded a late conditional draft pick for the Chiefs' fourth-string running back Knile Davis. And once he was traded, the Packers announced that they would be without Eddie Lacy for at least a couple of weeks. Davis is now moving up to feature back duties for the team, who will be playing on Thursday Night Football against the Bears. And I want to know, is Davis going to have an immediate impact on the game, John?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be their starter. I don't feel too comfortable starting him in fantasy, though, and expecting like a big amount of points. Still has to learn a whole new playbook, get ready for a game in about a 60-hour window. So it's a lot to expect from him to put up a big day. However, if you did grab him in waivers, it'd be great to just wait maybe this week to see how he does, see how he picks up on the offensive playbook, and then take it from there. So, like you said, Lacey will be out for a couple of weeks. So if you got him, then I think you should be a little excited at least. He did pretty well with the Chiefs. What do you think, Herbert?
Well, first off, I believe it's pronounced Knile Davis,
Very
but
funny.
not on my radar right now. I mean, it's a nice story. It certainly helps the Packers. It's great for the Packers. He's going to have a chance, I suppose. Who knows? Ball's in his court. I'm not thinking about it this week. Way too many options out there around the league for a flex or even a running back that I'm taking before Knile Davis. You still have Starks that'll be back at some point. You still have Lacey that will be back at some point. I'm not buying.
And speaking of injuries, I'm going to quickly run down the latest injuries around the NFL, as there were a lot of injury reports this week. First up, Carlos Hyde's been ruled out against the Bucs on Sunday with a shoulder injury. He was spotted with a sling in practice this week, and head coach Chip Kelly said it was not a serious issue, and he should be back after their Week 8 bye against the Saints. You'll hear more about the 49ers backups later in the show from our gurus. And coming off of a bye, Doug Martin was not able to participate in practice on Wednesday due to his ailing hamstring. After practice, the Bucs head coach Dirk Koetter said that Martin suffered a setback and would probably not be ready for the game against the 49ers. Jacquizz Rodgers will take his place and get the start against one of the most vulnerable run defenses in the league.
Jizzy Rodgers.
Your boy.
I love him.
Next up, LaShawn McCoy had a bit of a setback during Wednesday's practice when it was announced that he had a mild to moderate hamstring injury. Rex Ryan was unsure if McCoy would be ready for the game in Miami, saying that we feel good about the guys that we have. Stay tuned in our Fringe Rankings segment to see who will be in line for the start if McCoy does not play. And the Giants stud Odell Beckham Jr. missed Wednesday's practice with a hip injury. He dinged that up during the first half of the game against the Ravens. The Giants are probably just limiting his reps before their early game in London on Sunday morning, but keep checking our Twitter for any updates.
Speaking of London, this will be Nettie Beckham's first trip to England, and she is most looking forward to taking long rides in those strange little cabs they have over there. I'm not really sure what that means, but check back with our Twitter, and we'll let you know.
That sounds a little dirty, but I'll let that slide.
I was going to say it sounds romantic, but okay.
Three minds, thinking differently.
Moving on, it was also announced on Wednesday that Eddie Royal will be out for the Bears on Thursday Night Football with a toe injury. Now, Royal injured his toe during the game last weekend against the Jags and did not have a chance to heal up in time to face the Packers. You know what that means, John, right?
Hashtag more Meredith.
More Meredith.
He's going to go so egg.
Yes, John, more Meredith. Also noteworthy that Devontae Adams is listed as questionable with a concussion for the Packers, and he is a game-time decision. Moving along, we have a little bit of sad news to share. The Jets wide receiver and the very handsome man Eric Decker will miss the rest of the season and possibly most of 2017 after undergoing hip and shoulder surgery. Tough blow to the Jets, who have also announced that Geno Smith will be their starting quarterback this weekend. Ryan Fitzpatrick was struggling mightily the last couple of weeks, throwing an insane amount of interceptions that led to his benching. Let's bring in the gurus real quick for this one. Do you guys think that the same thing applies to the Jets' offensive players now that they have a new quarterback as it does for the Steelers players?
First off, I'd like to wish a speedy recovery to Eric Decker.
Yes.
Hopefully he returns to the field next season at some point. But let's get back to that QB situation. Honestly, it can't get any worse than what's been happening with the Jets offense the last couple of weeks. I still think Marshall is a must-start in fantasy leagues just due to the fact that his upside is there. He's a big guy. He's their number one target. I just feel like they're going to try to get him the ball no matter who's at quarterback. I also believe Enunwa and Powell become solid flex plays on most weeks, but Geno hasn't started in over a year and a half. So I could see how this weekend, especially against the Ravens, it could be a little frustrating at first with these owners of these players. So I honestly just check back with our Twitter, see what we got him in our rankings. But right now, if I'm starting a Enunwa and Powell, I'm not feeling too confident.
Yeah, it's almost Halloween here, and I can see the headlines and like the local papers in New York when it's a horror show. I have no idea what you're going to get out of Geno Smith, so you can't feel good about anyone on the Jets. So that's not to say that someone can't have a good game, obviously, but if you have Powell or Enunwa, you can't feel good about starting them. I wouldn't. I would start a lot of other people in front of them if you can. If you have to, you have to. But Geno Smith, I got to see what's going on. Horror show.
Yeah, and I mean, he only played for part of the game this past weekend, but he didn't have one target, yet alone a catch to Brandon Marshall, which worries me a little bit as a Brandon Marshall fantasy owner. But we're going to take a trip to the West Coast where Travis Benjamin missed Wednesday's practice with a knee issue. It's uncertain how serious or if Benjamin will miss the game Sunday against the Falcons in Atlanta, but stay tuned to our Twitter for updates on his status. Also, Theo Riddick did not practice on Wednesday due to an ankle injury. However, observers said that he looked much better in the locker room. Sitting Riddick today may have just been a precaution, so I'd keep an eye out for Thursday and Friday's practices if Theo is in your league. Washington's Deshaun Jackson also missed Wednesday's practice with a shoulder injury. Head coach Jay Gruden says he is sore and expects him to play Sunday. Tight end Jordan Reed returned to practice in a limited fashion, sporting a non-contact jersey. His status is still unknown for Sunday. The Browns' Terrell Pryor Sr. is dealing with a hamstring strain, but head coach Hugh Jackson said he expects Pryor to make the start against the Bengals. Pryor also stated that he owes it to the city to go out there and play.
Well, he must be inspired by the recent championship teams in Cleveland.
Listen, the Indians are going to the World Series for the first time in quite some time, so that city is on a roll. However, the Browns are a shit show. Don't forget that.
Hey now, don't knock the Browns fans. They're feeling real good over there, and maybe they'll ride the wave and win a championship in the next couple of years.
Doubt it.
On that note, Latavius Murray and Tyler Eifert came back to practice this week. Both were limited in practice, and in order for them to start, they would both need to be a full participant in practice to have a great shot at playing this weekend. So there's a little bit of hope there.
Well, listen, I crushed Tyler Eifert last week. I don't even know why. I think I was just mad. But there's no denying that he has huge upside. So if he's out there, and he's out there in a lot of leagues, you got to grab him. I think he's that valuable. It has at least that much big upside. Get him if you can. If you can carry a second tight end, get him. If you can't, you got to take a shot.
No, it's a good tip. He's available in one of my leagues, and I've looked at him many times considering picking him up, but unfortunately, that's my league with 4 bench spots, and it is hard to add additional guys who just aren't going to play for me. But that is going to do it for the latest injury news, and coming up are Week 7 Fringe Rankings. We will be right back.
Want to know which Fringe players you should start or sit in your fantasy leagues? Want up-to-the-minute news and analysis from the beat reporters around the league? Follow @FantasyDopes on Twitter to get your fix and fill the void of having to worry about which player will feast or famine.
Welcome back, Dopeheads. Now, before we get to these Fringe Rankings, I want to discuss someone that's on your obvious starts list, John, because I'm actually considering benching Carson Palmer and was surprised that he made it to your obvious starts list this week. Why is he on the top of your list?
That's a fair point to bring up. I'll give you props for that one. This was before he was listed on the injury report Wednesday. He's dealing with a bit of a hamstring issue. But he's going to have to take some stress off of David Johnson, who absolutely murdered the Jets with 3 touchdowns. They're facing off against the tough Seattle Seahawks defense. So I believe in order for the Cardinals to win this game, they're going to have to throw the ball a ton. And if he's healthy, he should return a nice game after scuffling the last couple of weeks.
All right, John, touche. And with that, let's get to our Fringe rankings for week 7 after John was still celebrating his Cameron Meredith pick, and so am I.
Hashtag always Meredith.
Always Meredith.
So many hashtags tonight.
Love it.
Cameron Meredith.
Can't get enough.
And as a weekly reminder, we're going to be adding personal notes to some players on our blog at www.fantasydopes.com/blog. So without further ado, let's get to the Week 7 Fringe rankings. And first up on our Fringe rankings list, we have Jamal Charles. John, why don't you take us through that pick?
Yeah, Jamal Charles leads this list only because head coach Andy Reid stated that he's not ready for a full workload just yet. If you didn't know, he's coming off that ACL injury. They're just playing carefully with Charles, so it might take another week or two for him to enter the obvious ranking list, in my opinion. But for now, this is still a great start for him. He's going up against the Saints. They're at Kansas City. They should be able to use him both in the passing game and in the running game, so it's a great start if you have him. He leads my Fringe rankings list.
I expect this to be the last time I see his name on this list. That's all I have to say, Jillian.
And at number 2 and 3, we've got Cameron Meredith, of course, and Giovanni Bernard. But next up, we're going to talk about a couple questionable players for this weekend. Herbert, do you want to run us through Deshaun Jackson, Travis Benjamin?
Coming in at number 4, Deshaun Jackson did not participate in practice on Wednesday. He's been bothered by the shoulder injury. Coach Jay Gruden said it didn't sound serious and should be in line to start in Detroit. If he does, he should put up good numbers. He hopefully gets your touchdown. He's going against the 23rd ranked secondary this season. Go with him if you got him.
And I'll take up Benjamin coming in at number 6. He actually missed practice on Wednesday with a knee injury. Head coach Mike McCoy said he's hopeful that Benjamin will be ready for the game against the Falcons on Sunday. So it sounds like he'll suit up, and he's a great bounce-back play after putting up his worst fantasy day last Thursday night against the Broncos. Obviously, they were a stiff test, and he didn't really get anything going, but I think Rivers is going to air the ball out a little more in Atlanta. They're more susceptible to getting touchdowns on their receivers, so Benjamin should have a nice day if he stays healthy.
And I find it interesting that Demaryius Thomas has made the Fringe rankings list at number 7 this weekend. Considering I might bench him, why is he made the Fringe rankings list this weekend?
Yeah, he makes his first appearance here on the rankings. He hasn't really been involved as much as Emmanuel Sanders so far this season. Trevor Siemian seems to like Sanders a little more in the offense so far, and he's going up against a defense that allows the 3rd fewest points to wide receivers and 7th in receiving yards allowed. So it's a tough matchup for him. I just don't like his situation right now, but it's kind of hard to ignore his talent. So that's kind of why I have him at 7. But again, this is up to the owner. If you want to bench him, that's totally up to you. The writing's on the wall for him. So that's all I'll say about that.
And at number 8, we've got another questionable Terrell Pryor Sr. Boys, do we think he might play this weekend or no?
Well, you better hope so. Terrell Pryor has been nothing short of Christmas morning every Sunday for fantasy owners that grab him. We're lucky enough or smart enough to grab him. So you hope he plays. And if he doesn't, I mean, can the Browns be worse? I don't know.
And closing out the top 10, we have Mike Wallace against the Jets this week. What are we thinking about Wallace?
He almost had a 100-yard game last Sunday against the Giants, so it looks like he's trying to keep the yards churning in the same exact stadium this Sunday against the Jets. And to go further, offensive coordinator Mike Mornhinweg most likely want to run the score up as much as he can against his former team in their stadium. So Wallace becomes a great play for that factor alone. And to make things better, Steve Smith has yet to practice with an ankle injury as of this Wednesday, so Wallace will have a little more targets coming his way should Smith miss this game.
And before we get to one of our personal favorites, let's talk about Chris Ivory at number 12 on the list.
So this is actually a pick of the week here. I'm pretty much going bold right here. But as I said last week in the podcast, I think Ivory's going to take over this Jaguars backfield. I mean, he kind of did that last weekend against the Bears. He outproduced and outsnapped Yeldon, and he scored his first touchdown with the team. So now he looks to keep things going against the Raiders, who are actually ranked 30th against the run, and they're back home in Jacksonville. It's a bit of a bold prediction, but I really like his spot and his potential that he could put up big numbers.
And Herbert, do you want to talk about one of my favorites and yours, Mr. Hunter Henry? Tell me about him, listed at number 14 on our list.
Hunter Henry, he had double-digit points in the last 3 games, okay? So there's no reason he can't go and make it 4 straight here against the Falcons defense that gives up the 3rd most points to tight ends so far this season. Take that as you will, but Hunter Henry is a must-start here.
And coming from one guru's personal favorite to another guru's personal favorite, Jacquizz Rodgers, or what do you like to call him, John?
Well, Herbert likes to call him Jizzy Rodgers, but I like to call him Jacquizz Rodgers. Give it that little edge to him that he already has. Guess to start over Doug Martin this weekend. Should be in line for another 20 to 25 carries. He's an excellent flex play against one of the worst running defenses in the league. I don't see how you can not start this guy. His potential is sky high. I know he's a bit of a scat back, but hey, you got to give him the shot. He's going to have a great game. Start him if you got him.
I love Jizzy Rodgers, and I love him in Week 7. Must start. Big performance. He's gonna be big. He might get a call from Dion on Sunday night.
Remind me after this podcast to come back to Jacquizz Rodgers just to talk about it.
Okay.
Between us 3. Okay. Coming in at number 23, we've got Will Fuller, who's dealing with a little bit of an injury. Do we think he's going to play this weekend?
Will Fuller, again, at 23, moves down a bit in the rankings due to his ailing hamstring injury and going up against one of the toughest defenses in the league. All signs do point to Fuller starting in this game, but he's not as strong as a play as he would be as if he was healthy. So
yeah, I agree. I think another week maybe for Fuller to get better. Going up against one of the toughest defenses, it's kind of tough. So if you got him, you want to start him, that's totally up to you. But I don't really expect much from him coming out of Denver.
And we've got another questionable player on our list at number 27, Steve Smith Sr. What is his deal for the weekend?
So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, he sat out of practice on Wednesday. He's still dealing with that ankle injury that caused him to miss last Sunday's game against the Giants. There is a small chance that he does come back for the game against the Jets, but he would need to be at least a participant in practice starting Thursday. So I feel like the Ravens may wind up holding him out another game, in which case Kamar Aiken, their other wide receiver, gets to boost up the ratings since he filled Smith's role against the Giants last weekend and put up a decent game. So
we have Wallace ranked high on this list, so we're guessing Steve Smith Sr. sits, and that puts more points in other people's pockets. So
exactly.
And number 31, Michael, what's his name?
Kanile Davis.
Kanile Davis.
We spoke about him before. We'll see what happens. A lot of question marks.
All right, and since we're already talking about the Packers and Davis, we are going to move over and talk about Ty Montgomery, who filled in a little bit in the running back role. How much usage do we think he's going to get this week?
Listen, while Randall Cobb got all the ink, Montgomery benefited most from the lack of running back depth on Sunday. He only saw 3 carries, but he lined up in the backfield often in the second half and finished the day with a team-leading 10 catches on 12 targets. That's nothing to turn your nose about. And you look around, you read the papers, you'll see everyone's very high on Montgomery this week. So Montgomery should continue to have a big role in the backfield on a short week, especially with Devontae Adams likely to miss on a concussion. He's a must-add in PPR leagues and worth a look in deeper standard leagues as well.
And moving down the list at number 38, we have Mike Gillislee. And with LaShawn McCoy a little bit banged up, not knowing if he's going to play or not, what are we going to expect to see from him this week?
Well, Gillislee scored in back-to-back games. That was with McCoy in the backfield. So if McCoy misses this game, I think he jumps up in the top 20 of our rankings. However, we still have to prepare that McCoy will be active, so he may play a little bit more of a role. And he's actually been used in the red zone this year as well, so he might have some opportunities to score against Miami. Could be a nice deeper play, but for now, I would temper expectations just until we know McCoy is going to be playing or not.
He's had great games the last 2 weeks, and that's with McCoy having huge games. So I think he's got a real shot this week of making a difference.
And at number 41, we've got Adam Thielen coming off a bye week and playing for the undefeated Minnesota Vikings. They should still have a lot of momentum going into this week, guys.
Another little bold prediction I have here. Before the bye, Mr. Thielen had himself a game against the Texans. He caught 7 of 8 targets, had 127 yards receiving with a score. It is important to note that Diggs was out for this game, but the Vikings have been giving Thielen some looks before that big game. So now with Diggs possibly coming back from an injury, they may give him some more targets so they won't rely on Diggs as much in case he's not at 100% full health. Now, this is a big boom or bust play, but I have confidence that he will have a role against the Eagles, who aren't a bad defense themselves, but I think they're due for a pretty shitty game, especially against an undefeated team.
And moving farther down the list to number 55, we've got Matt Forte, who is another questionable player for this week on the Jets. What do we think going on there?
Yeah, if you're a Forte owner, you're like a little child lost at a playground with a swing, empty swinging back and forth. You have no idea where your mother is. I don't know what's going on with it. It's bad. You're a Jets owner. I remember an early podcast saying there's so many weapons there. I don't know what happened. It's a disaster. So you're white knuckling stardom. I guess you hope for the best. Who knows? Who I want to talk about down on 61st Street, Zach Zenner, going up against Washington. For those of you who don't know, Zach Zenner is the running back for the Detroit Lions. He rushed 14 times for 58 yards and caught both of his targets for 19 yards total in Week 6 against the Rams. Riddick, I think, is going to be out. Dwayne Johnson, I'm not sure, but...
The Rock is going to come out of retirement and play football?
I meant Dwayne Washington, John. Apologies. But listen, Zenner is the clear-cut leader in the backfield. They did sign Justin Forsett last week. I don't see him being a threat. We've discussed him before. Zenner's going to be the guy this week. He's going to punch 2 balls in the end zone. Mark it down. He's my guy this week. I'm going strong on him.
Yeah, it's some big talk.
Yeah, that's a bold prediction, but I like it. I like your zest.
And moving down the list to number 68 and 69, we've got Kendall Wright and Jack Doyle. Kendall Wright is coming off of a breakout game in Week 6. How do we think he's going to follow that up this week?
That's a good point, Jillian. He's now 2 weeks removed from his injury, and I believe Wright may see the most snaps in this game against the Colts than he has all season so far. He was only on the field about 35% of the snaps last week against the Browns, but he made the most of it, scoring a 48-yard touchdown and finishing the day with 133 yards on 8 catches. Since no one else has really stepped up on the receiving end of the offense, hint Tajay Sharp, Wright may wind up as the number 1 wide receiver option in Tennessee when this is all said and done. So I expect him to have a nice little game against the Colts, who are dreadful on defense. And on the opposite side of the field, we have the tight end Jack Doyle, who was pretty much a factor after Dwayne Allen went down with a sprained ankle. When Doyle was involved with the offense, he caught 4 passes for 53 yards and scored a touchdown. Now, with Dwayne Allen missing a couple of games moving forward, Doyle may be in line for similar production like he had against the Texans on Sunday Night Football. So he might be a nice little streaming option if you got a couple of tight ends on bye. I know I have Greg Olsen on buys in a couple of my leagues, so I'm looking elsewhere. And if Jack Doyle is available, I'm grabbing him and starting him.
Well, listen, I will take number 75, Tavon Austin, over both of those guys. I think he's ranked a little too low here. He hasn't had huge breakout games with multiple double-digit catches, but I think he's going to go off Sunday. He's going to get in the end zone for sure, maybe twice, maybe a bit of a breakout game. I take him over Kendall Wright and Jack Doyle.
So are we saying that Kenny Britt, Todd Gurley, and Tavon Austin are going to have all big games? They're going to put up at least 31, 35 points against the Giants in London?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
That is extremely bold. That's like Steve Mariucci bold on game day morning.
Well, has the Giants defense showed you anything to think that they can stop these playmakers?
I guess against not against a quarterback that's ranked one of the lowest in the league. I mean, that's just like I said, it's pretty bold, and I don't think they're going to score that many points on the Giants, especially in London. Tavon Austin may have a decent game. Britt may also have a good game, but it's going to be hard for 3 Rams players to have great games. That's all I'm saying.
Listen, John, you can talk. you can talk numbers all you want.
I got you, bruh. I got you. That's why Austin's ranked lower than most of these guys, though. It's because he's involved with the punt return team, but like it's rare that he gets into the end zone doing that. And then sometimes he's usually an afterthought in the offense. So I think that's why he's ranked this low. I think you're just being a little biased towards the Giants.
Well, not everybody gets points for the punt returns.
And that's exactly why he's low.
That's true, Jillian. All right, well, let's move on.
Let's move on to Arian Foster, who still is not 100% yet. What do we think his playtime is going to be with Jay Ajayi on the team?
We'll talk about him next week if he's done something. I can't talk about a guy who hasn't been on the field.
I will say he was a full participant in practice on Wednesday, so Foster May winds up playing. The capacity he plays at is probably not going to be starter. Jay Ajayi looks like he's going to be the starter. Foster may be his backup. We'll see how that splits out against Buffalo.
And coming in at number 81, we've got Mike Davis against Tampa Bay this weekend. How do we think he's going to play out?
Well, he's in line to start this game against the Bucs now with Carlos Hyde out with that shoulder injury. However, Chip Kelly expects to split carries with all of his running backs, including Sean Drawn and Dwayne Harrison, who's actually on the practice squad. So I just think these backs are way too risky to play this week. It seems like they're going to be all over the place. They're not going to have that many carries between each other. But if I were to guess, I believe Davis has the most productive game over Drawn, but that's just a guess, and I honestly would rather avoid this situation completely rather than take a chance and start one of these guys.
Interesting stuff, John. I'm looking at number 85, Kenny Stills, Miami Dolphins. He's sneaky deep. He's connected with Tannehill several times this year for some deep bombs and found the end zone. Going up against Buffalo, which has a decent defense, but isn't as good as you might think they were or would be under Rex Ryan. And let's remember that Mike Pouncey, center for the Dolphins, came back last week in their brutal beatdown of the Steelers. So he's back. So what does that mean? That means a stronger line. That means a running game, which has already gotten going with Jay Ajayi, is only going to be that much better, and you have a healthier Arian Foster, okay? With a little better line also comes a little bit more time for Tannehill to throw the ball. Who's he throwing to? Well, besides Kenny Stills, he's got two guys named Jarvis Landry and Devontae Parker that are both pretty good. So what am I saying here? Bottom line, Kenny Stills has the potential. He's shown that he's already done it to catch a deep ball and put some good points up for a flex position. I say Adam.
And closing off our list before we get to our quarterbacks, let's talk about Tyler Boyd coming off of his best week of the season. How do we see things looking for him this weekend?
Yeah, he started to get a little more involved with the offense against the Patriots last weekend. Caught 4 or 5 targets for 79 yards, which included a nice leaping catch in the fourth quarter. I think he's a good bench stash as of right now if you can afford it. He hasn't gone over 80 yards so far this season, but he may start getting more involved in the offense as his rookie campaign moves along. So against Cleveland, they're a terrible team. Sorry, Cleveland fans, it's the truth. At least you got the Indians. He could be a nice play maybe in FanDuel or DraftKings as a really cheap option if you really need him there. But I think as of now, for fantasy season-long purposes, you can just stash him if you want, see how he does, and then maybe play him the following week.
And from Fringe rankings to our quarterback rankings, let's highlight a couple of quarterbacks to stream for this coming weekend. And the first one on the list is a bit of a surprise, John. Talk to me about Brian Hoyer.
Yeah, he's my pick of the week as a quarterback. Saw a comparison to his game and Aaron Rodgers' games in their last couple of starts, and Hoyer actually has way better numbers than Rodgers across the board. Yards, touchdowns. Now, it's also important to note that Jordan Howard struggled a bit against the Jaguars last weekend, and he may continue to struggle against a tough run defense. So that means Hoyer will have to air out against a weak Packers secondary that's also missing Sam Shields. Yeah, I think he's actually out for the season with back concussion, or at least they put him on the IR. So Hoyer has also thrown for over 300 yards in his last 4 games, which makes him my favorite pick of the week. Who do you got, Herbert? Who's your pick?
Listen, John, Brian Hoyer should not be number 1 on any list anywhere. Marcus Mariota is my guy. He's coming off his best performance of the season with 284 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's got a lot of momentum right now, and he's going up against a Colts defense that is not playing well. And again, don't be surprised if he rips off a couple sick runs and gets in the end zone that way as well.
Damn, Herbert, you hashtag petty as hell on that one.
Does anybody want to talk about my pick of the week?
Yeah, you could say. You can
Hold
go.
on, John, do that again. That was good. That was nice. And then
What? No, I'm not saying that again. React to that. I mean, there was
Jillian,
silence there.
I can't react to that. I'm an old white guy. Jillian, what say you, Jillian?
I say Andy Dalton. I like the matchup this week. I mean, he's going against the Browns. We can't stop talking about play the people going against the Browns. So Dalton threw for 6 touchdowns last year in 2 games against the Browns. And, I mean, I think he's a must-start this week at home against them. I have Russell Wilson on my team, and I picked up Dalton to play ahead of him. So I like the matchup.
It's time to cock that red rifle.
Yes, I love it. I was going to say, bringing up Russell Wilson, he's actually number 10 on this list. He is practicing in full this week. However, he still may be...
And that elsewhere is Boykin.
Boykin ain't doing shit, Herbie. Stop it with your Robbie Anderson and Boykin bullshit on this podcast.
Oh, I'm telling you. It's going to happen one of these days.
In your dreams.
All right, friends. Before things get a little too out of control, let's head out of here. The gurus have spoken, and we will continue to update our list as injury news and other information becomes available throughout the week. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Dopes to get up-to-the-minute injury news and updates on the latest in fantasy football. Any last words, gentlemen?
Herbert, if I was in a league with you, I would crush you like a squashing ant.
Wow, big words, big words.
You talk a tough game, John, but we'll see what happens when the gloves come off. I don't even know what that means, by the way.
I feel like the gloves are already starting to come off.
They're off and they're ready to be cocked like the red rifle.
Oh, cha-ching!
Things just escalated to another level. So until next time, bye guys.
Peace.